March 15, 1990. Budapest, Hungary. Foreign Minister Gyula Horn stood at his office window, watching thousands of Hungarians mass in the streets below for the anniversary of the 1848 revolution. Their chants weren't directed at Moscow anymore. The Soviet Empire was crumbling. Instead, the crowd roared about Transylvania, about our Hungarian brothers suffering across the border in Romania. Horn's secure phone rang. The caller was his Romanian counterpart, and the message was blunt. Romanian troops were moving toward the Hungarian border, not as a show of force, as preparation for war. This wasn't 1956, when Soviet tanks had crushed Hungarian freedom. This was 1990, with communism dying and nationalist fury exploding. Two Soviet satellite states, Warsaw Pact allies who had trained together, shared intelligence, coordinated foreign policy for 4 decades, were positioning forces to fight each other over territory disputed since the Treaty of Trianon in 1920. Horn knew the absurd truth. Hungary and Romania had remained brotherly socialist republics through the entire Cold War, while nursing a hatred so deep that Moscow had deployed more resources managing their mutual antagonism than countering NATO on several fronts. The Cold War was ending, but the hatreds it had frozen in place were thawing with terrifying speed. When Soviet forces liberated both Hungary and Romania from Nazi control in 1944–1945, Stalin believed he had solved the region's nationality problems with elegant simplicity. Both countries would be socialist. Nationalism was a bourgeois disease that communism would cure. Class solidarity would replace ethnic grievance. The future belonged to the international working class, not ancient territorial disputes. National antagonisms will disappear in proportion as capitalism is eliminated, Soviet theorists assured both Budapest and Bucharest, paraphrasing Engels. The Hungarian-Romanian border dispute over Transylvania, a region with significant Hungarian minority populations but under Romanian sovereignty since 1920, would become irrelevant once both nations achieved socialist consciousness. Soviet planners were spectacularly wrong. Marshal Kliment Voroshilov, head of the Allied Control Commission in Romania, reported to Stalin in 1945 that Romanian and Hungarian communist leaders could barely sit in the same room. Romanian party chief Gheorghe Gheorghiu Dej insisted that Transylvania was historically, ethnically, and legally Romanian. His Hungarian counterpart, Matyas Rákosi, declared that 2 million Hungarians in Transylvania were suffering under Romanian chauvinism and needed Budapest's protection. Stalin's solution was characteristically brutal. Suppress both nationalisms through terror, then bind both countries so tightly to Moscow that their mutual hatred couldn't manifest as conflict. They will hate each other, he reportedly told Molotov. But they will hate us more, and that will keep them obedient. The strategy worked, partially. Through the 1950s and 1960s, both countries built socialism under Soviet oversight. They joined the Warsaw Pact in 1955. They coordinated military exercises. They voted identically in the United Nations. They appeared to be model socialist allies. But Romanian intelligence services monitored Hungarian diplomats in Bucharest with greater intensity than they watched Americans. Hungarian military planners maintained detailed contingency plans for conflict with Romania that were updated more frequently than NATO scenarios. KGB reports throughout the 1960s documented what Moscow called unhealthy nationalist tendencies in both countries. But these tendencies were directed at each other, not at Soviet control. "We pretended to be brothers," a former Hungarian Foreign Ministry official recalled in a 2003 memoir. "We used the language of socialist internationalism. We attended the same Warsaw Pact meetings. And the entire time, both sides were preparing for the possibility of armed conflict." The Transylvania question had poisoned Hungarian-Romanian relations since the Treaty of Trianon stripped Hungary of 2/3 of its historical territory in 1920. Transylvania, roughly the size of Indiana, with a population of 7 million, had been part of Hungary for 1,000 years. After Trianon, it went to Romania. During World War II, Hitler awarded the northern half back to Hungary through the Second Vienna Award in 1940, making Romania a bitter enemy even as both remained Axis allies. When Soviet forces arrived in 1944, Stalin briefly considered restoring all of Transylvania to Hungary as reward for switching sides against Germany. Instead, he gave it all to Romania in 1945, not out of justice, but as punishment for Hungary's enthusiastic Axis participation and reward for Romania's desperate last-minute defection. The decision ensured permanent instability that Moscow could exploit. Through the 1950s, under Stalinist terror, both countries suppressed open nationalism, Rákosi in Hungary and Gheorghiu Dej in Romania. Arrested, imprisoned, or executed anyone who raised territorial issues. Hungarian minority activists in Transylvania who protested Romanianization policies disappeared into the Danube Delta Gulag. Hungarian irredentists who spoke of reclaiming lost territories were sentenced to decades in labor camps. But the Transylvania issue never died. It festered. The first serious crisis erupted in 1959, when Romania suddenly closed Hungarian language schools in Transylvania and merged the Hungarian Autonomous Region into larger Romanian administrative districts. Budapest protested to Moscow. Romanian party chief Gheorghiu Dej countered that Hungary was fomenting separatism among Transylvania's Hungarian minority. Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev, already dealing with the Sino-Soviet split, ordered both parties to shut up and sit down. Romanian archives opened after 1989 revealed that Gheorghiu Dej had actually prepared for armed conflict. Romanian military intelligence compiled detailed assessments of Hungarian forces. The Securitate, Romania's secret police, developed plans for rounding up suspected Hungarian irredentists in the event of war. One classified report from 1959 stated, "In the event of Hungarian armed provocation, Romanian forces will secure Transylvania within 72 hours and advance to Budapest within 2 weeks." Hungary prepared similarly. Newly declassified Hungarian military documents show that the People's Army maintained Defensive Plan Transylvania, which was actually an offensive operation designed to seize the Transylvanian cities of Cluj and Timișoara in the opening hours of a conflict before Soviet intervention could stop it. Both countries were Soviet allies. Both were Warsaw Pact members, and both were seriously planning to fight each other. The 1960s brought more provocations. Romania under Nicolae Ceausescu, who took power in 1965, pursued an increasingly independent foreign policy. Ceausescu refused to allow Warsaw Pact exercises on Romanian soil. He declined to participate in the 1968 invasion of Czechoslovakia. He opened relations with Israel and West Germany. He was the only Warsaw Pact leader who maintained friendly ties with Communist China during the Sino-Soviet split. Western observers praised Ceausescu as a maverick, a reformer, a communist leader willing to defy Moscow. They missed what Hungary saw clearly. Ceausescu's nationalism was virulently anti-Hungarian. His independence from Moscow meant he could accelerate Romanianization of Transylvania without Soviet interference. The West thought Ceausescu was brave. Hungarian dissident György Conrad wrote in 1984, "We knew he was dangerous. Every step away from Moscow was a step toward Greater Romania, and a threat to Hungarians in Transylvania." Between 1965 and 1985, Ceausescu systematically dismantled Hungarian cultural institutions in Transylvania. Hungarian language universities were merged into Romanian institutions. Historic Hungarian place names were Romanianized. Hungarian villages were destroyed to make way for agro-industrial complexes that diluted Hungarian populations. Ceausescu's plan for systematization called for demolishing 8,000 villages, disproportionately Hungarian, and relocating their populations to concrete housing blocks where they could be monitored and assimilated. Budapest protested constantly. The Hungarian Communist Party sent hundreds of reports to Moscow documenting Romanian persecution of ethnic Hungarians. János Kadar, Hungary's leader from 1956 to 1988, raised the issue at every Warsaw Pact meeting. Moscow's response was consistent. Stay quiet. The Soviet Union valued Romania's nominal Warsaw Pact membership, even if Bucharest ignored most directives. Khrushchev, Brezhnev, and later Gorbachev all told Hungarian leaders the same thing. Transylvania is Romania's internal affair. But Hungary wouldn't stay quiet. Throughout the 1970s and 1980s, Hungarian state television broadcast thinly veiled historical programs about Hungarian glory in Transylvania. Hungarian radio beamed programming directly to Transylvanian Hungarians. Hungarian cultural organizations maintained contacts with Transylvanian Hungarian intellectuals. And Hungarian intelligence services ran networks inside Romania that rivaled CIA penetration. A former KGB officer stationed in Budapest recalled, "We spent more time monitoring Hungarian intelligence operations against Romania than against NATO. They had sources everywhere, in the Romanian Foreign Ministry, in the Securitate, even in Ceausescu's personal staff. And Romania was doing the same to Hungary." March 1987. Târgu Mureș, Marosvásárhely, Transylvania. The city was roughly 50% Hungarian, 45% Romanian, and a powder keg. For months, tensions had been rising over Romanian authorities' plan to reorganize a Hungarian cemetery and merge a Hungarian theater with a Romanian one. On March 19th, Romanian nationalist groups began gathering in the city center, shouting, "Transylvania is Romanian." Hungarian counter-protesters assembled near the Hungarian Reformed Church. What happened next nearly triggered war. Romanian crowds attacked Hungarian demonstrators. Local police stood aside or joined the Romanian attackers. Over 2 days, riots left 6 dead, hundreds injured, and the Hungarian consulate in Cluj under siege. Hungarian residents barricaded themselves in churches and cultural centers. Romanian mobs burned Hungarian language books in public squares. The Hungarian government went ballistic. János Kadar, though a Soviet loyalist who had crushed the 1956 uprising, was also a Hungarian nationalist when it came to Transylvania. He demanded an emergency session of the Warsaw Pact Political Consultative Committee. Romanian fascism is terrorizing ethnic Hungarians, Hungary's formal protest stated. Budapest cannot stand idle while Hungarian blood is spilled. Bucharest's response was defiant. Ceausescu claimed the riots were provoked by Hungarian irredentism and Western intelligence services. Romanian state media broadcast lurid accounts of Hungarian separatists attacking Romanian patriots. The Securitate arrested hundreds of ethnic Hungarians in Transylvania on charges of conspiracy against the Romanian state. Behind the scenes, both countries mobilized. Hungarian military archives reveal that in late March 1987, the People's Army went to a heightened readiness state, not against NATO, but facing south toward Romania. Hungarian mechanized divisions in southeastern Hungary, near the Romanian border, received orders to prepare for rapid deployment. Hungarian Air Force MiG-21 and MiG-23 fighters increased patrols along the border. Hungarian military intelligence intensified surveillance of Romanian troop movements. Romania responded in kind. The Romanian Army's 4th Army, stationed in Cluj and responsible for Transylvania's defense, moved additional units toward the Hungarian border. Romanian border guards received authorization to use lethal force against infiltrators. Ceausescu ordered the Securitate to prepare internment camps for ethnic Hungarians suspected of separatist sympathies. Soviet intelligence was alarmed. A March 1987 KGB report to Mikhail Gorbachev, partially declassified in 2007, stated, "The Hungarian-Romanian confrontation has reached a critical point. Both sides are positioning military forces. Without firm Soviet intervention, armed conflict is possible." Gorbachev, dealing with Afghanistan, arms control negotiations with Reagan, and early glasnost reforms, couldn't believe what he was reading. Two Warsaw Pact allies were preparing to fight each other. He summoned both Kadar and Ceausescu to Moscow. The April 1987 meeting was explosive. According to notes taken by Gorbachev's interpreter and later published, Kadar accused Romania of ethnic cleansing. Ceausescu accused Hungary of revanchist imperialism. Gorbachev, exasperated, reportedly told both, "You're communists, you're supposed to be internationalists, and you're acting like 19th century nationalists." Kadar's response was revealing. "General Secretary, with respect, we were nationalists before we were communists, and we'll be nationalists after communism is gone." He was right. Within 3 years, communism would be gone. The nationalism would remain and intensify. Gorbachev temporarily diffused the March 1987 crisis through sheer Soviet authority. He ordered both countries to stand down. He threatened to withdraw Soviet support. Meaningless for Romania, which barely relied on Soviet backing, but credible for Hungary, which still depended on Moscow for energy and trade. The immediate military crisis passed. But Târgu Mureș had revealed the truth. Socialist brotherhood was fiction. National hatred was real. December 1989, the final crisis. When Romanian Revolution erupted in mid-December 1989, Hungary saw opportunity. The Ceausescu regime was collapsing. Romanian security forces were fighting revolutionaries in Bucharest, Timișoara, and other cities. Transylvania was in chaos. Hungarian government documents from December 1989, declassified in 2009, show that Budapest seriously considered military intervention in Transylvania. Not to annex territory, Hungary's reformist government under Miklós Nemeth wasn't that reckless, but to protect ethnic Hungarians from Romanian violence and to establish humanitarian corridors. Hungarian military planners dusted off intervention scenarios. Hungarian medical units and supplies were pre-positioned near the border. Hungarian intelligence officers crossed into Transylvania to assess conditions and make contact with Hungarian minority leaders. On December 20, 1989, as Ceausescu fled Bucharest, Hungarian Foreign Minister Gyula Horn received reports that Romanian military units were executing ethnic Hungarians suspected of supporting the revolution. The reports were partially true. The Securitate was executing revolutionaries of all ethnicities. But the ethnic dimension inflamed Hungarian opinion. Horn called an emergency cabinet meeting. The discussion, reconstructed from participants' later accounts, was stark. Defense Ministry officials presented plans for limited incursion into Transylvania. Foreign Ministry officials warned of international condemnation. Prime Minister Nemeth asked the defining question, "Can we stand by while Hungarians are murdered?" The answer was yes. Barely. Hungary's reformist government, which had already opened its border with Austria and helped trigger the fall of the Berlin Wall, chose not to intervene militarily in Romania. But it was a close decision. A different government, or a more inflammatory incident, could have produced a different outcome. Throughout the Cold War, Moscow's management of the Hungarian-Romanian antagonism evolved from suppression to manipulation to exhausted tolerance. Soviet strategy. In the 1950s, Stalin and Khrushchev used the Transylvania dispute as leverage. Both Hungary and Romania needed Soviet support for their territorial claims, which meant both had to remain loyal. A 1956 KGB analysis, declassified in 1996, stated, "The Hungarian-Romanian contradiction is useful. It prevents either country from developing independent foreign policies." By the 1960s, this strategy was failing. Romania under Ceausescu was developing an independent foreign policy precisely because Moscow couldn't credibly threaten to support Hungary over Transylvania. The Soviets needed Romanian independence to showcase diversity within the socialist camp. They couldn't simultaneously back Romanian sovereignty and support Hungarian irredentism. Soviet archives reveal growing frustration. A 1968 Politburo discussion, held just before the invasion of Czechoslovakia, included this exchange. Brezhnev: "We have to invade Czechoslovakia to prevent liberalization." Suslov: "And what about Romania? Ceausescu is more independent than Dubček." Brezhnev: "We can't invade Romania. Hungary would cheer and then expect Transylvania as reward." The Czechoslovakia invasion actually worsened Hungarian-Romanian relations. Romania refused to participate, winning Western praise. Hungary reluctantly contributed token forces. But while Western observers saw Romania's defiance as admirable, Hungarian officials saw it as Romanian manipulation, using anti-Soviet posturing to distract from oppression of Transylvanian Hungarians. Hungarian adaptation. Unable to use force, Hungary weaponized culture and memory. Through the 1970s and 1980s, Hungary became a beacon for Transylvanian Hungarian culture. Hungarian publishers printed books banned in Romania. Hungarian universities admitted Transylvanian Hungarian students. Hungarian cultural organizations preserved traditions that Romania was suppressing. This wasn't passive resistance. It was strategic preservation of Hungarian identity in preparation for an eventual settlement. "We knew communism wouldn't last forever," recalled István Horváth, a Hungarian cultural official. "We knew that someday the Transylvania question would be open again. We wanted to ensure that when that day came, Transylvanian Hungarians would still be Hungarian." Hungary also cultivated Western sympathy. Hungarian diplomats at UN conferences on minority rights consistently raised the plight of Transylvanian Hungarians. Hungarian émigré organizations in the United States and Western Europe lobbied their governments. By the 1980s, Western human rights organizations were monitoring Romania's treatment of ethnic Hungarians, something Budapest had carefully orchestrated. Romanian countermoves. Romania's strategy was demographic engineering. If Hungarians were the problem, the solution was to eliminate Hungarian majority areas through forced assimilation and population transfer. Ceausescu's systematization program, launched in 1974 but accelerated in the 1980s, targeted rural areas, disproportionately Hungarian. The plan called for consolidating thousands of villages into agro-industrial complexes. In practice, this meant bulldozing Hungarian villages, destroying historic Hungarian churches and cultural sites, and relocating populations to Romanian majority areas. Western observers focused on systematization's economic absurdity. It was bankrupting Romania. They missed the ethnic dimension. Hungarian researchers later documented that over 60% of villages slated for demolition were Hungarian majority, though Hungarians comprised only about 7% of Romania's total population. Romania also intensified cultural suppression. By 1988, there was only 1 hour per week of Hungarian-language television in Transylvania. Hungarian-language publications were restricted to a handful of approved titles. Hungarian cultural organizations required Securitate approval for activities. Hungarian churches were monitored constantly. The message was clear: assimilate or emigrate. Thousands of Transylvanian Hungarians chose emigration. Between 1980 and 1989, approximately 40,000 ethnic Hungarians left Romania, legally and illegally, for Hungary. Each refugee who arrived in Budapest brought stories of oppression that fueled Hungarian anger and determination. Proxy warfare. Neither country could fight directly without risking Soviet intervention. So they fought through proxies, intelligence operations, and diplomatic warfare. Hungarian intelligence services ran extensive networks in Transylvania, supporting Hungarian cultural organizations, smuggling literature, and documenting Romanian abuses. The Hungarian Secret Service, AVH, later AVH, then reformed as various agencies, maintained better intelligence on Romanian security forces than on several NATO countries. Romania retaliated by infiltrating Hungarian émigré communities, spreading disinformation about Hungary's true intentions toward Transylvania, and conducting influence operations in Western capitals. Securitate defector Ion Mihai Pacepa revealed in his 1987 memoir, Red Horizons, that Romania devoted enormous resources to countering the Hungarian threat. Both countries also competed for influence with Transylvania's other minorities, Germans, Jews, Roma, hoping to build coalitions against each other. Romanian authorities encouraged German-Hungarian antagonism. Hungarian organizations tried to align with Transylvanian Jewish communities. It was ethnic politics of Byzantine complexity, all occurring within the supposedly internationalist socialist framework. March 1990. Post-communist explosion. With communism dead in both countries, the Transylvania dispute erupted with unprecedented violence. On March 19 and 20, 1990, exactly 3 years after the 1987 riots, Târgu Mureș exploded again. This time, the violence was worse. Romanian and Hungarian nationalists clashed in street battles. 5 died, hundreds were injured. Romanian crowds besieged Hungarian cultural institutions. Hungarian crowds retaliated against Romanian targets. The new Romanian government, barely 3 months old and barely in control, struggled to respond. The new Hungarian government, led by Prime Minister József Antal, faced enormous domestic pressure to intervene. 500,000 people demonstrated in Budapest on March 25th, demanding protection for Transylvanian Hungarians. If the government won't act, nationalist leader István Szurka declared at the rally, Hungarians will go themselves. Volunteers, actually armed, began gathering at the Hungarian-Romanian border. Former Hungarian military officers discussed forming protection units to enter Transylvania. Hungarian nationalist organizations established humanitarian supply lines that included weapons. For several days in late March 1990, Hungary and Romania appeared closer to war than at any point during the entire Cold War. The crisis exposed the Cold War's fundamental failure to resolve, or even successfully manage, nationalist tensions. 4 decades of socialist internationalism had accomplished nothing. The moment communist control disappeared, hatreds emerged with explosive force. International intervention finally cooled tensions. The United States, the European community, and even a weakened Soviet Union all pressured both countries to stand down. Western observers were shocked. "We thought the end of communism would bring peace and democracy to Eastern Europe," a U.S. State Department official recalled. Instead, we got nationalist violence that had been frozen in place since 1945. Both countries eventually stepped back from the brink. Hungary didn't intervene militarily. Romania didn't expel its Hungarian minority. But the March 1990 crisis demonstrated that the Transylvania dispute remained unresolved and dangerous. Long-term strategic impact. The Hungarian-Romanian antagonism shaped Cold War dynamics in unexpected ways. For the Soviet Union, it demonstrated the limits of ideological engineering. Communism couldn't erase nationalism. It could only suppress it temporarily. Once suppression ended, nationalist fury returned, often more intense for having been bottled up for decades. For NATO, it revealed fissures within the Warsaw Pact that the West had underestimated. American intelligence had focused on Soviet satellite tensions, missing the satellite-satellite conflicts that were equally destabilizing. For European integration, it proved that ending the Cold War wouldn't automatically bring stability to Eastern Europe. Ethnic disputes, territorial grievances, and nationalist movements had survived communist rule and would complicate post-Cold War order. For both countries, the dispute consumed resources, distorted foreign policies, and poisoned domestic politics. Hungarian leaders who could have focused on economic reform or political liberalization spent enormous energy on Transylvania. Romanian leaders who could have addressed catastrophic economic problems instead prioritized suppressing Hungarian minority rights. The Hungarian-Romanian confrontation over Transylvania reveals a truth about the Cold War that contradicts its own mythology. The superpower conflict didn't transcend nationalism. It froze it. Soviet archives, Hungarian government documents, and Romanian secret police records all tell the same story. Communism didn't resolve the Transylvania question. It simply prevented its resolution through force while ensuring it remained perpetually inflamed. For 45 years, two Soviet allies prepared for war against each other while proclaiming socialist brotherhood. After communism's collapse, both countries eventually found a peaceful framework, sort of. Romania granted cultural rights to its Hungarian minority. Hungary renounced territorial claims. Both joined NATO in 1999 and the European Union in 2004. European integration accomplished what Soviet socialism never could, making border changes unthinkable and minority rights enforceable. But the dispute still simmers. Hungarian-Romanian relations remain tense. Romanian nationalists still speak of Hungarian irredentism. Hungarian politicians still campaign on protecting Transylvanian Hungarians. In 2020, a Romanian government proposal to restrict minority education rights triggered Hungarian protests and diplomatic incidents eerily similar to those of the 1980s. The lesson extends beyond Hungary and Romania. Throughout the former Soviet bloc, Yugoslavia, Georgia, Moldova, Ukraine, frozen conflicts thawed when communist control ended. The wars in the Balkans through the 1990s, the Russia-Georgia War in 2008, and the ongoing conflict in Ukraine all stem from territorial and ethnic disputes that communism suppressed but never resolved. Gyula Horn, Hungary's foreign minister during those tense days in March 1990, later reflected on the absurdity. "We were trained to fight NATO. We spent 40 years preparing for World War III against the West. And when the test came, when we nearly went to war, it was against our Warsaw Pact ally, over a dispute from 1920, using nationalist rhetoric that predated communism by centuries. The Cold War ended. The nationalism that predated it, and that will outlive it, continues.